It is in a time of great change, but right now it's time for us to dial in, focus down, and get underway with the final of GP Lyon between Gregor Kowalski and Marcio Carvalho. The time is now, my friends. Let's get to it. Hello, my friends, and welcome to live coverage of GP Lyon. You are in the booth with me, Riley Knight, and him, Simon Gertzen, the Pro Tour champion. It is great to have your company as we close this thing out once and for all. On your screen, the competitors that will be going at it here in the final of this modern tournament. Marcio Carvalho on Abzan, Gregor Kowalski on the new kid on the block in red-green Eldrazi. A pretty interesting matchup, Simon. There are going to be a lot of lessons to take away from how this one pans out.
Yes, and the early turns are particularly important. How quick does each of these decks assemble the board state they are looking for? How much are the discard spells of Marcio going to hit? So, for example, Inquisition of Kozilek, not the best card when your opponent's threats are Thought-Knot Seer and Reality Smasher.
Now, both players opening with a pair of 1-drops. Nihil Spellbomb is not a particularly impactful card in this matchup, although Marcio Carvalho choosing to run it in the main deck as just a hedge against so many of these graveyard-based decks.
And you can always cycle it. It's not great, but investing 2 mana for this kind of effect is not the end of the world. Also, getting an artifact into your own graveyard can actually grow the Tarmogoyf despite you exiling the opponent's graveyard.
Get you closer to Delirium as well with those Grim Flayers. Now, Carvalho's had a nice disruptive option with Fatal Push, removing that Noble Hierarch from contention. Now, Kowalski leans quite heavily on these mana dogs, Simon.
He wants the early mana acceleration, and then, if possible, he wants to see an Eldrazi Temple in his opening hand.
We can see he does have some big Eldrazi beaters, one of them in the form of Reality Smasher in hand. But right now, the action back on Carvalho, who's got a Liliana of the Veil, and Simon, I suspect he's going to be able to deploy it right here and right now.
Yes, Reality Smasher actually one of the natural predators of Planeswalkers, but that of course doesn't mean you shouldn't run out your Lilianas when you have the chance.
So Carvalho cycling away that Nihil Spellbomb. Marshflat's going to go and search up a land, and this means that Liliana of the Veil can come down right on schedule on turn number 3. We call this deck Abzan, and that is of course because it is this 3-color combination, but the white is really only for 6 cards across the 75.
Yeah, I think 3 Lingering Souls in the main deck and 3 Stony Silences in the sideboard, so actually very close to being a black-green deck, but Marcio thinks it's more important to have access to those white cards than, for example, play Field of Ruins in the main deck.
Field of Ruin, a little bit too restrictive on the mana when we're looking to play with 3 colors of spells. Fantastic in 2-color decks, however, as it pairs very well with lots of basics being played. But here is Liliana of the Veil immediately going upstairs. Carvalho snapping off his decision as to what he's going to discard. Now, the reason that's face down is, of course, he doesn't want to give Kowalski any extra information before he makes up his mind.
Yes, it's a simultaneous decision, so that's how you'll see those competitive players resolve a Liliana of the Veil activation.
Endbringer now. And we're going to see an Eldrazi Obligator come down and immediately pressure this Liliana. And this is good stuff from Kowalski, as it means that Liliana can't edict away the 3-1.
No, that's actually a really nice way of pressuring Liliana and also making sure that you're not getting edicted this turn. For example, a Thought-Knot here would have been pretty terrible to cast, running right into Liliana's -2.
So while Liliana will ultimately cost Kowalski another card should Marcio choose to go upstairs here, it does mean that Kowalski has the onboard answer to the Planeswalker, although Carvalho, plenty of disruptive options in his deck.
He was actually holding 2 Lilianas, as you can see, in his graveyard. I was thinking if maybe he should have deployed a Tarmogoyf, and then if Kowalski has that Thought-Knot Seer, which of course looks like a great play, then Carvalho has 2 Lilianas, so he's guaranteed to get it.
Kowalski discarding a Reality Smasher here. I think he has a second in hand in addition to what looks like a Kessig Wolf run. Here is Tarmogoyf, so that's a nice speed bump here for that Eldrazi Obligator, and Kowalski having to have a pretty quick think about how he wants to move forward.
First of all, we had to count the size of Tarmogoyf. It's actually pretty huge here because Artifact and Planeswalker are the 2 types that we rarely see in the graveyard. And then we have instant, land, and creature. Mm-hmm. So that's 5 types just waiting for a sorcery to appear.
So a 5/6 for 2 mana. Not a bad deal, to be honest. Not a bad deal there. And now Kowalski hard-pressed to find an answer to the Tarmogoyf. He is playing cards like Lightning Bolt as removal options, but none that really get the job done in the face of a 5-6. Eldrazi Obligator another way here to put through some pressure. And Simon, you're not a big fan of this play.
Well, it's not a great play. I'm sure Kowalski isn't a big fan of this play either, because he's just losing an Obligator like that.
And a Birds of Paradise to follow up here for Kowalski. I bet he wishes he had that Noble Hierarch stuck around, because then, of course, he could have nicked the Tarmogoyf himself.
Yeah, I mean, the game would have gone completely differently had he been allowed to keep that mana accelerant.
Kowalski leaning pretty heavily on those early mana dorks, only playing the one-of Bird of Paradise in addition to those 4 Noble Hierarchs, and it really does open you up to having that acceleration kind of disrupted by opposing decks. In contrast to something like Scapeshift that plays these 2-mana ram spells, such as Secura Tribella and what have you, that don't go up against disruption quite as unfavorably.
It looks like Marcio is tanking here. And that signals a fatal push, because his Liliana went to the graveyard. Now a 3 casting cost card is actually killable by fatal push.
Fair game indeed, as we see the Obligator hit the bin, and Carvalho is into top deck mode, which isn't generally the worst for these black-based mid-range decks.
No, but when your opponent still has cards in hand and 5 mana available, Reality Smasher mana in particular, that is a bit scary.
That is a good point, actually, there, Simon, because, of course, the Abzan decks, the Jund decks, the black-green decks, they do look to get to a war of attrition where both players are playing off the top of their library, but when players have cards in hand, that's when the green-black decks can fall a little bit behind.
You want to get into top deck wars, but you want both players to be on equal footing, to have approximately the same amount of resources available to them.
So Grim Flayer here, with Delirium well and truly turned on for Carvalho, means that it's a 2-mana 4/4 with a very powerful ability to make sure those top decks are as favourable as possible for the Portuguese player here.
Yep, and if you're Kowalski, if you attack with a Reality Smasher this turn, sure, you're bringing Carvalho down to 9, but what are your chances of winning against Tarmogoyf and Grim Flayer on the other side of the board? Maybe you have to play a defensive Reality Smasher, even though that's not big enough to block a Tarmogoyf. It's a really awkward spot.
The Grim Flayer has been an intermittent inclusion in these black-green decks. Certainly helps the games go long by filtering out those draws, clearing out dead cards from the top of your library. Not an active source of card advantage, but still can very, very much help the top of your library treat you more kindly. So Reality Smasher back on defense here. Carvalho accidentally taps that Temple Garden as he draws a card. An attack with the Tarmogoyf.
No. Still a 5/6, so no block realistically available.
And an Eldrazi Obligator here.
That's a huge draw.
One moment, please.
8, 12. It's almost lethal.
Kowalski can push through a huge amount of damage here, because in addition to that threaten effect by nicking one of Carvalho's creatures, there's also, as you mentioned, a 3/1 staple onto that effect.
But like I said, it's not enough. What you can do here is you probably want to attack with Grimflame. No, Kowalski doesn't have Delirium, so that would actually cost him a lot of damage. Maybe just take the Tarmogoyf and hit for 5, and hold back the 3/1 to chump block Tarmogoyf on the next attack. You could even double block Tarmogoyf, hoping that it trades cleanly with Reality Smasher. But that's of course very optimistic.
Kowalski now, and what feels like a pretty critical decision point for him. Eldrazi Obligator has been one of the surprising inclusions in the top 8 of this modern GP here. But I tell you what, it's done a lot of work for the poll over the course of this entire tournament.
Sorry, I'm just mesmerized by the artwork. I don't quite get what's going on, but it's threatening something.
It's a lot to take in. Reality Smasher in for 6 now.
This is actually nice. He's not revealing his cards just now. Maybe hoping that Marcio continues attacking with his Tarmogoyf, but then is exposed to the Obligator. I think Kowalski is heavily favored here with the surprise Obligator. 2 colorless sources as well. It works out pretty beautifully.
So, Grimflayer attacks, Tarmogoyf back on defense here. That's not going to work in the face of that Eldrazi Obligator here. but this trampling 4/4 is going to push through some damage any way you slice it. Kowalski is just going to take it here. I mean, Carvalho knows that bird would just be chucked under the Goyf here.
Absolutely. He needs Lingering Souls.
He has it in hand.
And he got actually access to 3 more cards, which all could have been Lingering Souls, and then he would have put it in the graveyard to flashback.
So Carvalho looks like he's going to come up trumps in this particular interaction, as one of his cards in hand is Lingering Souls, a great source of repeated blockers and a way to pressure your opponent once all the dust is settled.
This is incredibly close. With the trample and the chump blocks available to both of these players. Grim Flayer has trample, Reality Smasher has trample. There's a Keswick Wolf run. They're going to be Lingering Souls tokens. And of course, Carvalho knows that Kowalski is playing with the Obligator.
All 3 cards hitting the bin here. And it's a Lingering Souls now. And that's not what Kowalski wanted to see. You can see his face knitted together in concentration here. Kowalski down to 3 life. He draws a card. Obligator in hand. That looks like an Ancient Stirrings. And what's the play here for Kowalski? You can smell victory on the air for him here, Simon.
He had almost won the game already, but now the problem is you want to have as much trample damage as possible. Otherwise, your attack is just going to fizzle against the spirit tokens. But if you take the Grim Flayer, then Tarmogoyf is on defense, and Tarmogoyf blocks everything on this battlefield, except for the spirit tokens.
So Kowalski now. Obligator in hand. Doesn't have what it takes, you would think, to push through those final points of damage, thanks to that clutch Lingering Souls here from Carvalho.
I don't see a winning line this turn. And on the other hand, Kowalski isn't dead either. He can take 2 from the spirits, chump block the Tarmogoyf, and hold off the Grim Flayer with Reality Smasher. In fact, that's kind of what he wants. He wants Carvalho to tap the Tarmogoyf and to leave the Grim Flayer back on defense, because it makes it so much more likely that he can swing for lethal with the Obligator.
Given that the Grim Flayer has trample.
Yes, and you would take it off the defensive duty.
But Carvalho, of course, is able to flash back that Lingering Souls next turn, which is going to provide even more blockers.
And Carvalho, I'm sure, will be aware of the threat of the Obligator. I don't think the Tarmogoyf would actually attack in that spot. We would just see him attack for 2, you go to 1, flashback Lingering Souls, go. He might even, if he figures out that he can only lose to the Obligator, attack with 0 or 1 spirits, because he knows he has the win secured next turn.
Kowalski having a look through Carvalho's graveyard. I think once again counting out the number of card types in the graveyard. Looks like there are 6 now with the entrance of Lingering Souls, so that Tarmogoyf is a 6/7 by the look of things. What are we missing here? Just Tribal and Enchantment.
Bitter Blossom.
Oh, that'd be that, wouldn't it? So Kowalski now still yet to make a decision as to how he's going to proceed. Reconfigures those lands. Goes from the straight 4 to the tessellated 2 here. 6 mana. Hello? It's an Endbringer. Another big blocker here. Not as big as the Tarmogoyf, however. So Carvalho, it seems like he's just got him 6 ways from Sunday here.
Well, Kowalski wants to lure him into being overly aggressive here. Kowalski is basically saying, if you attack with everything, I have to chump block your Tarmogoyf.
Oh, Inquisition of Kozilek off the top here for Marcio Carvalho, and that sandbagged Eldrazi Obligator.
Do you see him nodding? I'm sure he said something like, I will Inquisition your Obligator.
Yeah.
That's what I would have said.
Yeah, he had him on it. Carvalho had him on it. He had the soul read there. He knew exactly what was up, and now just as you said, the Tarmogoyf comes across.
Now you're happy for the chump block because you know you've dealt with the Obligator.
So that means the Grim Flayer can stay back on defense here, and that's important because it means extra points of damage with the Tarmogoyf will provoke a chump block here from Kowalski. It looks like the double block might be the play.
Actually, I wanted to say it's the only play, but that's actually not true. You could chump block with either one of these creatures if you believe that having your choice of what to have stick will give you the better chance at winning the game. Of course, the best chance of winning the game is probably still to top deck Eldrazi Obligators, but I mean, I think you have to double block here. Jump blocking. Okay, yeah, jump blocking and then saying Obligator or
Obligator or bust. Obligator or bust here for Gregor Kowalski. Carvalho follows it up with that expected play of flashbacking Lingering Souls. And now it is all up to the top of Kowalski's library to keep him in this game number one here at the the finals here of GP Lyon. What has he found? It's another Noble Hierarch, an attack for 7. And Carvalho can line up this block here.
And that's actually a 9 powered Reality Smasher with the help of Keswick Wolfrun.
Keswick Wolfrun can pump the 7/7 Smasher to a 9/7 with double trample, which doesn't have any functional rules meaning, but all the same, double trample. And so the Grim player can get in and block enough points of damage. Carvalho knows that Kowalski has nothing else, right? He's got 0 cards in hand.
Kowalski is just doing the math 3 times.
Just trying to get it done here, and unfortunately for Kowalski, he goes down to the Portuguese superstar in game number 1, Marcio Carvalho, with a clutch Lingering Souls to get him over the line. It all came down to those spirit tokens.
Yeah, he found the Lingering Souls exactly in the turn that he had to. Otherwise, he would have lost to Reality Smasher and Eldrazi Obligator.
So players here are going to get the chance to have a look at opposing deck lists. This is par for the course here in the finals. Indeed, all of the top 8 here of the of GPs like this, making sure players are on an even footing. And I tell you what, viewers around the world, you too are on that even footing as we have a look at the deck lists that these players have been getting it done with this weekend. Marcio Carvalho on Abzan, as we saw. Simon, let's talk about how this deck will be positioned post-board.
Yes. So a few cards you don't really need in this matchup. I think Nihil Spellbomb is pretty weak. I don't love Liliana the Last Hope because it's just a lot less effective than Liliana of the Veil. And you can even cut some of these Abrupt Decays if you... Well, you can cast it on... You will have targets, but it's really not a great card.
Coming in from the board, however, there are some pretty some options that are going to make things this matchup a lot easier for Carvalho to navigate.
Yes, I'm looking at Tireless Tracker as just a good value card. I don't know how impactful Fulminator Mage will be. I think it's actually not very good in this matchup. I wouldn't expect Marcio to rely on that. But I want to talk about Damnation. I think Damnation has huge potential in swinging this matchup around quite a bit because it allows Marcio to play a much more defensive game plan. And if you have 2 Damnations, 4 Fatal Pushes, and 4 Liliana of the Veil after sideboarding, plus 2 Maelstrom Pulses, there's actually one card that I wanted to highlight which loses a lot of its value. Thought-Knots here.
Okay.
I think it's a mistake to keep in Thought-Knots here against decks that have such an easy time of dealing with it.
Because the Liliana of the Veil Edict effect is such a neat answer to it. Fatal Push is a 1 mana answer to it with a fetch land, and then a Damnation is trading even on mana and probably going to pick up another thing or 2 with it.
And it's such a bad top deck. Once both players are out of resources, out of cards in hand, and there's a Liliana of the Veil, or you're casting that Thought-Knot so your opponent top decks a Fatal Push or a Maelstrom Pulse, you are actually losing value.
You're giving them a card.
Yeah. So this is actually tricky. If you keep them in because you don't have anything better, you definitely need to realize that this card is not all upside.
Well, let's have a look at what else Gregor Kowalski is working with here in his red-green Eldrazi deck. It's not, of course, just Thought-Knot Seer. He has the classic 3-4-5-6 combo, Mana Reshaper, Thought-Knot Seer, Reality Smasher, and, of course, Endbringer here. But it's his sideboard we're going to focus on right now, Simon. And what's popping off the top for you?
Well, my first instinct is that traditional Abzan strategies are not at the top of his list when it comes to sideboarding. Most of these cards are for very specific matchups, and Abzan is not one of them. I mean, Relic of Progenitors, you basically always bring in against Tarmogoyfs. You also have Scavenging Oozes in the main deck already to attack the graveyard a little bit. And of course, Lightning Bolts and Dismembers are going to be good at dealing with some of these early threats. A card I'm kind of interested in is Engineered Explosives. Okay. A lot of the difficult threats are actually 2 mana cards. You want to deal with Dark Confidence, with Grim Flayers, with Tarmogoyfs. Actually, we saw that in game 1. You also might want to deal with Lingering Souls tokens. So Engineered Explosives probably my pick for the best card in Kowalski's sideboard for this matchup.
Well, plenty of interesting options for him to remove from his deck as well, Simon. I mean, is there anything that you see in that starting 60 that you're just like, okay, get that out of here, we don't need it?
Well, I wouldn't say you don't need it, but traditionally Lightning Bolt has a bit of a problem attached to it. If your opponent knows you're running 4 Lightning Bolts, they are not going to expose Tarmogoyf to it. So what they will do is they will make sure that the Tarmogoyf has 3 toughness with no instant in the graveyard, or 4 toughness if there is an instant in the graveyard, making it Lightning Bolt proof. And then the card, and I'm going to say that again, the card that I really don't like very much in this matchup is Thought-Knot Seer.
Mm-hmm. So we've seen, we've already heard that you said the Thought-Knot Seer might be not the best option for him post-board here, but what about things like Forkbolt and Mindstone? Well,
Forkbolt is a card you want in different matchups. Of course, it will kill a Dark Confidant if you're lucky, but I think it's just strictly worse than Lightning Bolt.
Okay, generally worse to tussle with threats like that, so that one might come out here. But well, anyway, you slice it. These guys are going to be ready for game number 2. They will have come up with a sideboard plan. You would think we're having access to the opposing lists now, and it looks like we're in readiness for game number 2 here. Carvalho has brought in Damnation. We can confirm that there, as we saw that card in his hand. He's opening 7 here, and oh dearie me, looks like Kowalski is already down to 6. How does this mulligan affect his chances?
Well, it doesn't. It's not positive, of course, but on the other hand, he is looking for the more explosive draws his deck can deliver. So if he doesn't have a 1-mana Accelerant or an Eldrazi Temple in his hand, he's better off going to 6 and having a more explosive start on the on the play.
He will have to find something special here. Carvalho already up a game in the finals here of GP Lyon. The format is modern, and it's been a fantastic weekend to bring you live coverage of this event here, but it all finishes with Sunday Night Magic. My name's Riley, joined by Simon Gertzen. Of course, we've had Tim Willoughby and Matej Zalakai also in the booth throughout this weekend. And on behalf of all of Team Coverage, our very heartfelt thanks extend to all of you, whether you've spent the whole weekend hanging out with us here in Lyon, or you've just tuned in for the finals. So, of course, welcome. By all means, welcome. It's great to have you along. But it's been terrific in every case, my friends, to bring you this event to your screens. And, of course, coverage continues over the next couple of weeks, Simon. As these players get ready for game number 2, we can have a chat about what's coming up next on the calendar. We're off to Memphis to explore Standard.
Yeah, finally, I have to say, because we haven't really seen Standard explored much recently.
We'll have a look now at what Kowalski's up to as he keeps his 6, keeps 1 on top, of course, and a Noble Hierarch to start things off. So we are off to the races in what may very well be the last game in the last match of this tournament here. Carvalho, no turn 1 play for him, so 3 mana available to Gregor Kowalski on turn number 2. And that means a Matter Reshaper can come down, Simon. Yep,
but Carvalho is taking the defensive posture here. He wants to draw out the game. He wants to play his removal spells when they are best. He wants to hide behind Lingering Souls. And I think this interaction between Liliana and Thought-Knot Seer, or in particular the power of Liliana in this matchup, is going to be absolutely crucial.
Just edicting big dumb idiots out of there straight away.
Yeah, maybe start off with the Damnation, nice and clean. Kowalski follows up with Reality Smasher, Endbringer, you name it, and then your Liliana, and suddenly the red-green Eldrazi deck doesn't look all that great anymore.
Just that 1-2 punch. And ladies and gentlemen, if you do need a trip to the fridge, or perhaps want to go and make yourself a nice ham sandwich in the kitchen, just wait until Kowalski has the chance to shuffle Marcio Carvalho's deck, because he does enjoy taking his time doing exactly that. We got away with murder a little bit there, as Kowalski only did the old 3 shuffles before passing it back. Carvalho on to turn number 2 now, and we'll see what he can find. It's an Abrupt Decay on the Noble Hierarch.
And we identified Abrupt Decay as one of the weaker removal spells in Carvalho's deck. The fact that this is still in the deck after sideboarding shows how much removal he's packing. That just means he has 10, 12 removal spells available to him after sideboarding.
Another nice play here for Kowalski with a Matter Reshaper number 2 coming down, second of his name. And this is a good option to continue to get value in the face of cards like Damnation.
Much more so than Thought-Knot Seer, right? It's almost the opposite Thought-Knot Seer. It's only 3-2. I'm not saying it has the same power level. In the vacuum, of course, Thought-Knot Seer is the more powerful card. But I want to draw your attention to that fact that Kowalski might not even have Thought-Knot Seer. I think we should definitely find out throughout the course of this match.
Carvalho does have a Damnation in hand, in addition to a Lingering Soul. So it'd be interesting to see Carvalho here maybe defending a little bit off the back of those Lingering Souls, and hoping that Kowalski overcommits, and then just clean things up with the Damnation, followed up by whatever's lying around. A Liliana, ideally, for him.
Yeah, Maelstrom Pulse would also be terrific here.
Oh, we're not going to top the Maelstrom Pulse we saw earlier throughout the rounds, where a triple Thalia's Lieutenant draw was punished beyond belief. The biggest blowout you'd seen in years, you said, Simon.
Well, this weekend, yes, but still.
Years and years, he said. In centuries, ladies and gentlemen. You can go back. I'm sure the clip has been made there somewhere.
It's funny, Carvalho could make 2 spirit tokens to prevent some damage, but he's actually taking 3 to fetch. Then he's losing his spirit, so it's not all that great of an exchange. Might even want to double block a Meta Reshaper, to be honest.
Carvalho is going to go searching now. Going to pay 3 if he wants to cast this Lingering Souls, because of course no basic planes, well, first of all in the deck, and second of all able to be fetched with that Verdant Catacombs.
2 good reasons. Yeah.
2 great reasons. Looks like Carvalho's hand's pretty stacked here, Si.
Oh, I like Abzan after sideboarding quite a bit.
Okay, well, it's going to be a forest instead, so we may see a Liliana of the Veil here. One of the cards available to him. Can't cast that Lingering Souls, of course. But Liliana of the Veil, an Edict you, he says.
Not the strongest Liliana, but sometimes you just have to use it as a removal spell.
Grove of the Burn Willows, of course, comes into play thanks to the trigger from the Matter Reshaper, given its converted mana cost of 0.
That could be a nice ramp into Reality Smasher as well.
Well, instead, it's a nice ramp into a Thought Not Seer, a card, Simon, that you said you didn't really want to see post-board. Looks like Kowalski isn't going to take you up on that advice here.
No, I understand that it might be too powerful, or that you might not have the alternatives in your sideboard to take it out. It's just a really interesting dynamic, this kind of tension of one of your best cards can also backfire and be one of your worst cards.
An engaging choice for Kowalski to make here as we see Abrupt Decay, a Grim Flayer, Lingering Souls Damnation, and another Liliana of the Veil. Perhaps that second Liliana explains why Carvalho was so happy to run out the first.
Absolutely. I think if you have only one Liliana there, you will find other ways of dealing with the Meta Reshaper. In fact, Abrupt Decay would have done the same job.
So what's Kowalski up to here? Have to have a very good think about it. There are a lot of cards here that he's got to worry about. I mean, Carvalho's hand is mono threats.
I mean...
mono powerful cards.
And you don't really want to get Damnation, right?
Mm.
I understand maybe the allure of exiling Lingering Souls. That's double value right there. But it doesn't take much foresight to see Carvalho draw a land and cast Damnation, and I don't think you want that to happen.
Especially as Kowalski is more or less priced into removing this Liliana. He's got to take a turn off of applying pressure to Carvalho's life total. So the Damnation is the pick here for Kowalski. And Carvalho, having already fetched for that forest, it means that Lingering Souls is not an immediate play for him unless Carvalho can again draw the white source he needs. Let's find what he can get here. It's Dark Confidant off the top.
Not a great pickup. Maybe a blocker for Matter Reshaper.
Just a Goblin Piker.
This turn where Marcio played the Liliana was really quite tricky because it also involved the fetch land and cutting yourself off of white sources. Maybe with the Abrupt Decay, this alternative line of saying go, dealing with one Matter Reshaper, and then fetching for pain-free white source would have ended up a little bit better. I'm not sure. It's really close.
It would have meant his life total was around about the same, given the fact that the remaining Matter Reshaper would still attack him.
He would have actually taken a bit more damage,
okay.
Yes. But on the other hand, he would have had white for Lingering Souls. I think that's a pretty big deal.
Which would ultimately save more life in the long run.
And then he would be sitting there with multiple Lilianas still potentially. Of course, not hitting that fourth land drop is a big problem in and of itself.
Big problem indeed here as Kowalski moves further ahead. He's going to find a way to try to close this game out nice and quickly, as he knows that Carvalho does have a pretty stacked hand if he gets the chance to deploy it. Kowalski, on the other hand...
Kowalski has a pretty stacked board. Kessig Wolf Run is not something that Abzan is happy to play against. Might even see Kowalski turn on the heat here, just get rid of that Dark Confidant, attack for 7. Maybe, well, if activating the Wolf Run is the best he can do, that's probably not great.
Well, would push through some extra damage over that X1 blocker here, but no, as it is, Kowalski's just going to get Bob out of here with a Dismember instead. Which member, he asks? Dismember, he says. And in come the clowns for 7 damage. Carvalho down to 8. Cavern of Souls is going to push out a Scavenging Ooze now. So if Carvalho doesn't come up with something very special here, he's going to go down swinger.
Yeah, I think this game is over. He didn't even find his lands, but also he is just succumbing to the pressure without really having done much at all.
Kowalski has just gone from strength to strength now, deploying both threats and removal in a very timely fashion. And Carvalho's kind of been left in the dust. He needed that White Horse, he needed that 4th land, and he also needed that Damnation. None of them came good for him, and now we're going to Game 3, Simon.
Yep, that was almost an easy win for Red Green Eldrazi. That one Abrupt Decay was cast on a Noble Hierarch. That meant two Matter Reshapers on the other side of the board. Liliana, just not the right answer for it. He needed Maelstrom Pulse or a land and a Damnation.
So Kowalski going to take a quick break here, which gives us another chance to have a look at the deck lists that both of these players are playing with. Looks like a bio break here for Kowalski as we see him stomp off into the distance. And, well, we didn't really get a chance to see any of those sideboard cards here from Kowalski. But, Simon, why don't you once again bring us up to speed on what we might be looking at for a post-board 60?
Yes, so Relic of Progenitors has always been great against Tarmogoyf. Not that you absolutely have to exile your opponent's graveyard, but sometimes shrinking that Tarmogoyf down to 0-1 in the middle of combat at the end of turn after it has taken damage is a really nice way of dealing with one of Modern's biggest creatures, best threats actually in the format. And then I was championing Engineered Explosives as well. I think with the way your mana curve looks, and of course sometimes if you have an Eldrazi Temple you might not tap as many lands for them, but your creatures actually cost 3, 4 and 5 predominantly. So I think Engineered Explosives for 2 could be a nice card, maybe even better now that Kowalski will be on the draw.
Well, that's what Kowalski's working with, and as you mentioned, he is going to be on the draw, so that will have an impact on how this game plays out. Let's have a look, however, at what Marcio Carvalho is playing with Abzan. Now, a couple of things to note here in his main deck. Not only is he playing 4 basics, which is a nice number in the face of cards like Path to Exile and, of course, Field of Ruin, but also a Tireless Tracker in the main. He's very concerned with making sure he gets value.
Yeah, this is a very conservative list, I would say. Even the 2 Treetop Villages. This looks like a list where you're not wanting to take many risks. 4 basics is a huge amount. Tireless Tracker is a nice piece of technology. I like the Liliana the Last Hope in this matchup. And regarding sideboarding, I think we understand this deck sideboard plan better than the Red Green Eldrazi. So especially the 2 Damnations and the fact that Abrupt Decay stayed in for game 2 shows us that Marcio is happy playing the control role.
Yeah, and this is something that the Abzan deck or green-black base decks are really able to do post-board. Is just slightly, not hugely, but slightly reposition themselves. We're not going to call these sideboard plans transformational by any nature, Simon, but all the same, they are able to adopt different postures, become, more aggressive, or perhaps, pull back a little bit and play more of a controlling game, especially with cards in other matchups, certainly, like Collective Brutality.
Yeah, one card that's actually tricky is Dark Confident. Marcio was on the draw, and then this Dark Confident doesn't look great. However, if you're going for this late game strategy, if you're going for the value, if you're going for all the removal, Dark Confident can also be your best friend. You just play him on turn 2, and then you remove threat after threat after threat, and you just bury your opponent in card advantage. Dark Confident actually doesn't deal that much damage in this kind of deck.
Well, no, given that the curve actually stops at 3 mana with between the various Liliana's, Tireless Tracker and Maelstrom Pulse, Dark Confident will generally not give you too much of a licking. And the other thing is, Reed Duke highlights this in his excellent series of articles about this sort of deck, is that the ideal start for any of these mid-ranged black decks is turn 1 Thoughtseize or Inquisition, turn 1 Disruption, and then turn 2 Threat. And of course they come in different forms. A Tarmogoyf off the back of a Thoughtseize will often come into play as a 3/4, and a Dark Confident is a way for these black-green base decks to stay ahead on cards despite answering every single thing 1 for 1, because that's all they do.
Absolutely. And that's, you don't need Dark Confident to trigger 5 times, but if it triggers only once or twice, you've already gotten a lot from it. You have to compare it to something like Matter Reshaper, which was great in game 2 that we saw, Dark Confident, if it triggers once, you've already gained the same amount of value of that card.
And if of course, if it remains uncontested, then we can see it really pull its pilot ahead a long way. And coming back to the point I made about the Abzan deck essentially having one game plan, which is just to trade 1 for 1 at every point. Every card in the Abzan deck that interacts is designed to trade 1 card for 1 card, whether it's a card in hand with Inquisition, whether it's a card on the battlefield with something like an Abrupt Decay. The Abzan deck is very happy to go low on cards in order to run the opponent out of resources. And
it's designed in a way that your 1-for-1 trades are beneficial for you in the long term. And then, of course, cards like Liliana of the Veil, Dark Confident, Lingering Souls, you do generate additional value as well.
Lingering Soul's critical as well because it can often trade, often trades for 2 cards, can sometimes trade for more. Even if it's not actively putting those cards in the graveyard, the fact that it can invalidate many of the cards that opponents are playing. Whether that's blocking opposing creatures or pressuring opposing planeswalkers. Lingering Souls, it's proven its worth in the modern format. Although, Simon, you mentioned that it might not be in the very best position, historically speaking.
No, it has been at times when Abzan was Abzan and Jund were the top decks of the format. Lingering Souls was the mirror breaker. So we had a time in modern Magic where Lingering Souls might have been in the top 3 of modern cards. I think that time is definitely over.
Carvalho, considering the card important enough for him to play, an extra colour, essentially, he is, of course, playing Stony Silencers in the board, but between those 6 cards, that is the entire makeup of white cards in this Abzan list. Players have dealt themselves their starting 7s. Let's see if they like the look of them, ladies and gentlemen, because this is the last game in the last match at GP Lyon. The format, of course, modern. You are watching Sunday Night Magic with me, Riley Knight, and him, Simon Goertzen, and we are about to give away $10,000 to the winner of this game of Magic, and of course, they get to take home a nice shiny trophy as well. It's been fantastic, as we've said, to explore the modern format, and we are going to have a couple of fresh faces at the next Pro Tour as a result of the tournament this weekend. Of course, all of the top 8 competitors getting a Pro Tour invite. Some of them needing it, Simon. Other ones have got it already in the bagski.
Yeah, these 2 players you see on the screen, they were not here for the Pro Tour invite. They were here for the trophy.
For the glory. For the fame. And, of course, for that stone cold cash that one of them will be taking home. No slouch in the prize purse for second place, of course. I believe it's 5K?
I believe so, yes.
I think it's it's a fair whack of cash in any case. Carvalho down to 6 now. He's having a look at them and screwing his face up. Bit of a raise of the eyebrows there. Looks like he's going to keep, however. A Scry keeping things at the top of the deck, and we are off, ready to go now with a game number 3 here in the finals of GP Lyon. That's a quiet start for Carvalho with a tapped Overgrown Tomb. Let's see what Kowalski's got here. Playing 5 1-cost mana dorks. If we see a Noble Hierarch or Birds of Paradise, it's undoubtedly going to be on turn 1 if Kowalski has his way.
No discard spell on turn 1 is already a great sign for Kowalski, who knows that he's going to be able to deploy his threats relatively unimpeded.
Basic Forest signals to us that we are going to see something like a Birds or a Hierarch. Simon, quick, call it.
Birds. No.
Ancient Stirrings instead. There we go. So Kowalski with something a little bit different. We've seen the power of Ancient Stirrings throughout the weekend in Tron decks, but Kowalski's got a fair few hits to get off it as well.
Yep. Always happy to pick up an Eldrazi Temple, of course. Ancient Stirrings in this deck is not as, let's say, advanced technology as in the Tron decks, but still, Ancient Stirrings here also will fix your mana, and then you will get your threats later on.
Not as completely busto as it is in Tron, of course.
Now we actually have a beautiful game developing here. We have a Confident on the play, negating that mulligan disadvantage, and it's fighting with Matter Reshaper, the value card of Red-Green Eldrazi, and actually one of the most difficult cards for Abzan to deal with.
So Thoughtseize you, says Carvalho. A bit of a backwards play here from him, as usually it's the Thoughtseize into the Dark Confident, but here we're running it the other way, spinning it right round here. And Kowalski, wow, look at that. quite a number of lands here, but running 2 reality smashes back to back is going to be a big game for him.
Yep, absolutely. But I mean, Thoughtseize will probably take one of them. I would be surprised if Carvalho takes the Scavenging Ooze. You don't really want to fight through multiple reality smashers.
Even that Scavenging Ooze, though, does have a lot of upside against the Abzan list, given that they have Lingering Souls, but most critically, of course, Tarmogoyf.
Yes, that's true, but I don't think this is a matchup where you can actually drain all the graveyards. This is not a match that goes infinitely long. Okay, maybe I'm wrong, but the main point I wanted to make is for Scavenging Ooze, you actually have Fatal Push, Abrupt Decay, very, very many ways of dealing with it. For Reality Smasher, well, almost none.
Yes, Reality Smasher is going to require not only something like a Maelstrom Pulse, but also a further card to be discarded here as another 2-drop comes down in the form of Tarmogoyf. And Tarmogoyf already pretty huge by the look of things, at least a 3/4.
Sorcery, land, and a creature in the graveyard. Kowalski cast Ancient Stirring, so Thoughtseize and Ancient Stirring are the 2 sorceries. Had Kowalski drawn Eldrazi Temple here, it would have been completely nuts. Reality Smasher into Reality Smasher, I think would have been almost unbeatable for Carvalho.
Well, right now, Kowalski taking pause to consider his next move here. Karplusan Forest. From a version older than time itself here. Not something we see often in the modern format. And now, what does Kowalski want to deploy? He's got an Engineered Explosives in hand. He did bring that in, Simon.
I think he drew a Relic of Progenitus. He doesn't.
Excuse me.
Doesn't have an Explosives.
They do look rather similar. And a Matter Reshaper attacking unafraid, of course, now that this relic is threatening to blow up the graveyards.
That's an aggressive attack. Saying basically, let's race, and I'm optimistic about my chances.
Well, he's got double Reality Smasher in hand.
Of course, as you mentioned, Tarmogoyf cannot block here because it would just shrink down to a 0/1.
Mm-hmm.
Blocking with Dark Confidant, not so interesting. So this is now going to be a life total race.
And Bob is going to go to town on Marcio Carvalho's life total, dinging him for 2 as Carvalho draws a Dark Confidant and a Tarmogoyf from the top of his deck for this turn. And we'll see what he's going to do with these resources that he's just drawn. Liliana of the Veil also in hand here for the Portuguese player.
But once again, that Matter Reshaper just being a card that is really difficult to handle for Abzan decks because it goes against this kind of strategy of trading 1-for-1 over and over again.
So Carvalho. What's the play here for him? Looks like a Maelstrom Pulse is hiding out at the back of his hand. It's a nice one against those double Reality Smashers, although they'll probably get in for a little bit more damage before he can deploy them.
You think that was his plan to Maelstrom Pulse? I still don't quite get it. It was more of a tempo play, I think. Just saying, I'm gonna take your next play away from you, and I hope this tempo advantage will get me there.
So Kowalski targets himself with the relic to ensure that the Tarmogoyf shrinks down to a 2/3. It's clever stuff from him. And now Liliana of the Veil. Edict you, he says. And Matter Reshaper is not long for this world. What can we find off the top? Another Karplusan Forest. So this means Kowalski has got Matter Reshaper. Oh, excuse me. He has Reality Smashers for days here. Choosing not to exile that relic just yet. And a third one as well, Simon.
Yeah, he needs 3 attacks. I think that's it's a simple strategy. Love not attacking Liliana here.
So
because that's probably your best way to lose the game. Attacking a Liliana, that's on 1 loyalty. That's not what you do when you're beating down with Reality Smashers.
Carvalho takes another 2 from his Dark Confidant down to 5. Even if he has an answer to this Reality Smasher, Kowalski has a backup pair in hand. And on a life total of 15, Kowalski looks poised here to win this game and indeed this match. Simon, what are his chances looking like here?
Great. Kowalski has Carvalho on 5, so I think everything came up beautifully for him. And once again, I didn't understand that Thoughtseize decision. I still don't understand it.
Reality Smasher, Kowalski, is going to invite Carvalho to discard a card here, but it's not going to be enough because he does have another Reality Smasher and then another one after that. So Carvalho is going to have to tussle with a long line of 5/5 trampling hasters here. And this game is heating up in a major way as Kowalski draws closer to this victory. Discards a Lingering Souls. A nice one to discard, of course, to that trigger, still maintaining value.
Relic of Progenitor is still in play, so not quite as good.
And away it goes now with Kowalski drawing an extra card.
And look at how miserable this is. Marcio even knows about the Reality Smasher. His Tomograph has 0 power. Both of his creatures can only soak up 1 point of damage. And then if he doesn't block with the Confident, he's actually just dead. Well, potentially dead to the trigger. So he has to chump block with Dark Confident if Reality Smasher attacks.
So, Reality Smasher is going to be deployed here by Gregor Kowalski. He's got 2 of them in hand. Having a good, hard, long think about it here. That Tarmogoyf currently a 0-1.
If he had only 1 left, it would be pretty tricky because maybe you want to let your opponent have a few more Dark Confident triggers rather than attacking into it. I think bringing your opponent down to 1 is also not, good enough. You have to find that final point of burst. But with 2 Reality Smashers, I feel it has to be good enough.
There's a Kessig Wolfrun in hand as well for Kowalski, but he doesn't have a way to activate it as well as cast this Reality Smasher here. He's so close. You can see him running the numbers, crunching them up, and trying to find a way forward.
I mean, what's the real alternative? Does he really not want to play anything? Or play Reality Smasher and not attack? That seems really ambitious if you are so close to victory here.
5 mana. Reality Smasher. Carvalho reaches for the pen here. This 5/5 trampling haste beater is about to punish Carvalho, whose draw just has not lined up with the threats that Kowalski has brought to bear.
Yep.
In comes the 5/5, attacking Liliana. Well, here's a turn up, Simon.
Yes, and I understand the reasoning. The reasoning is it's almost impossible for Carvalho to deal with the Reality Smasher unless he still has the Liliana in play. And actually, it's kind of nice because for Kowalski, the difference between 5 and 1 life is not that big. So I understand the reasoning here. It's actually pretty smart to get rid of Liliana because he was guaranteed to trade with the Smasher next turn. And Carvalho, that way, is actually still looking at this awkward Dark Confident.
And also, it disguises the fact that Kowalski has the second Reality Smasher here as well, as we see him deploy a Scavenging Ooze, so another potentially huge threat here for him. Off the top, it's a Temple Garden. Oh, beautiful fade there by Carvalho. And he draws. It's going to have to be something good. Didn't get a good look at it.
Now Kowalski is actually semi-safe from Edict effects even.
So Carvalho, Temple Garden in hand, in addition to another Tarmogoyf, going to take 2 down to 3 here. 2 mana. It's another Tarmogoyf. And an Abrupt Decay on the Scavenging Ooze. So those Tarmogoyfs immediately grown here to 3 power creatures. And can Carvalho find his way back into this, Simon?
9 points of toughness on Carvalho's side, 10 points of power on Kowalski's side. He needs to put 8 points of toughness in the way of Reality Smashers, and that means it's chump block time.
Second Reality Smasher here, both of them coming in. You see Kessig Wolfrun played by Kowalski. It's not going to be key now, but it could be in the coming turns. So Carvalho is going to have to line up these blocks here. And oh my goodness, chump block city here for the Portuguese player.
Yeah, Kowalski has a really nice choice here as well. By the way, beautifully navigated by Kowalski. He can assign 4 damage to Tarmogoyf, 1 to Dark Confident, or just win.
Or a Dismember for the Tarmogoyf, which means that Gregor Kowalski has played masterfully to overcome Marcio Carvalho and win the entire tournament, Simon, with a deck that I don't think any of us saw coming.
Yep, he didn't even convince his friend Canister to play Red-Green Eldrazi.
Well, I mean, it would have to be a very, very special deck that prevented Glogowski from not playing Land and Control, but I tell you what, a very, very special deck is what we have just seen unfold before our very eyes. We have Gregor Kowalski playing a deck that was just absolutely on no one's radar apart from maybe his and a couple of his mates, and he's won the whole tournament with it, Simon.
He broke this weekend's metagame with his red-green Eldrazi.
Absolutely, he did. Sneaking in to the top 8 in 8th position on breakers. He's done a terrific job of keeping himself in it throughout the weekend, and we're going to get a chance to chat with him in just a little bit. But Simon, your final impressions from this weekend. We've seen Modern continue to evolve, adapt and change, and that's going to continue, of course, as the days and weeks continue from here on out. But what are you taking away from this weekend?
Tron is a very real thing. If you're playing Control, make sure that you can beat it and not just, Fields of Ruin might not be enough. 5-color humans for me on the decline. Burn, actually, maybe something to invest some time in. Overall, we have to see how Grixis Death Shadow evolves with Jace entering the battlefield. Lots of open questions.
Lots of open questions, and of course, a lot of data coming your way to crunch through in the coming weeks and months, ladies and gentlemen. Simon, thank you so much for all of your company, your support, and your friendship throughout this weekend. It's been terrific to hang out with you, my friend, but we are going to have to make way for the champion of GP Lyon. Gregor Kowalski joins us as we bid a fond farewell to my co-commentator and welcome the champion of this tournament to the desk here. Gregor Kowalski, please, mate, take a seat, whack that headset on your noggin, and let's have a chat about what has happened here. First and foremost, my friend, congratulations. What a weekend you've had.
Thank you.
It's been terrific to see this deck that, as we said, really kind of come out of left field here. Was this a deck that you have been playing for a long time, a recent acquisition of yours? Talk us through the story of Red Green Eldrazi.
No, we just basically found this deck out before the Pro Tour with Channel Fireball and Ultra Pro testing team.
Mm-hmm.
So we were about to play this deck at the PT, but few days before the tournament, the rest of people just decide to not play this deck. They switch into something else. I was the last one that believed in the deck, so I just played it. I managed to finish 7-3 at the modern part of PT, so I found I like this deck, enjoyed playing it. It's also big surprise effect, so people are making mistakes because don't know my list and stuff like that. So I tried to play this again, and it worked.
Obviously, it worked, mate. You're the one with the trophy at the end of the weekend. Talk us through your tournament experience. Obviously, there was that big sweat for the tiebreakers at the end of round number 15. Were you feeling confident throughout the weekend? I mean, did you have some lucky moments? What was the story of your GP Lyon?
Yeah, I basically had few super top decks. Basically the second Dismember for the Ulamog. Obviously, land was my out because I had Obligator, or however it's called, the 3-1 guy with haste. So I had a lot of outs, but it was super exciting. Also, a round before that, I played against Blood Moon deck. So my opponent had Chandra, had 2 tokens of Lingering Souls. I was at 2 life with only red source, but my opponent was at 2 life, so I just took the lightning bolt at him.
Easy.
So yes, I basically was lucky whole weekend. Yeah.
Well, look,
how we win the GP.
You've navigated a top 8 that was filled with Tron. We've seen Tron come to the front of the modern metagame, but of course, starting next week, we are going to be playing with Jace the Mind Sculptor and Bloodbraid Elf. A quick take from you on this weekend's metagame and how you expect things to change.
I don't really know. Everyone is talking that Jace is broken and shouldn't be unbanned and it's gonna change anything. So I don't know. I just see what happens.
Well, you'll be joining the rest of the modern world in paying attention to how things pan out. Gregor, stick with us for just a minute as we close the show. I'll get you to stay there. As we finish things off here from GP Lyon, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the EU coverage team, I do want to reiterate once again what a pleasure it's been to bring you live coverage of this event on behalf of Rich Hagen, Stephen Leeming, Rashad Miller, Tim Willoughby, Matej Zalakais, Simon Gertzen, Toby Henke, Neil Rigby, Matt Light, and Frank Carsten. What a pleasure it has been to bring you coverage of this modern event once again. Our thanks also go out to the judges, the tournament operators, and all the rest of the staff who have done a terrific job in making this event possible. And, of course, for the players for turning up and playing. It's all fantastic to see how well people have done and the varied fortunes that people have had as we've explored this modern format. But, of course, the biggest thanks, as ever, ladies and gentlemen, go to you. That's right, you personally, wherever you are, sitting around the world at home, sharing in this celebration of one of the most wonderful and diverse formats in modern Magic. It's been terrific, and so thank you so much for choosing to to spend your weekend with us. It has been terrific. On behalf of everyone, ladies and gentlemen, here from Team Coverage, we're looking forward to seeing you next week at GP Memphis as we explore Standard. A lot of stuff to learn from that. The Magic Online Championship coming up in weeks after that, and of course we'll be back in Madrid in the next couple of months to kick things off in Europe once again. So stick with us here at Team Coverage, and we will see you next time on twitch.tv/magic. We're looking forward to it. Don't forget, everyone, that we're all winners for having taken part. It's just that, as ever, some of us win a little bit more than other people. On behalf of Team Coverage from Lyon, this is Riley Knight saying good night.
Hey.